Welcome back, basketball fans, to NBA Summer League 2K24. I'm your host of NTC, Aaron Washington. Collar Meyer, to my left, is joining me on this broadcast, and we have the special opportunity to welcome back to the podcast for the second time, Keandre Ashley, aka Hoops Intellect. If you guys have watched any of our recordings from last year, you will recognize this man to my left. He has a great YouTube page where he does a whole ton of draft content, so he's in the weeds when it comes to the players that are going into Summer League. Once they get to Summer League, he's keeping a close eye on these guys. He's got his head all in the inner workings of the draft process and once they get out to Summer League. So, Keandre, we want to thank you once again for joining us. I feel great knowing that you feel comfortable enough to join us for a second time, and we didn't scare you away. So we appreciate the time in, and I hope you enjoyed your time in Vegas so far.
Yeah, man, it's been great. I just running into you in the hallway earlier, and we just set this up real quick. So yeah, I love to do the show and do it in this environment. Been having a good time at Vegas once again. This is my third time, so yeah.
So it's Summer League's all about, right?
Exactly. Making connections, having a great time, and just enjoying some hoops together. Yeah. We love that. So, Keandre, let's jump right into the content, man. And, as we know, you are a major contributor to the draft scene. Your channel is all about draft content. You're looking at these guys, their strengths, their weaknesses. You do big boards. You do the scouting reports. You do the whole nine. And we really would just want to start this conversation with the rookies. So when it comes to the rookies that are in Summer League right now, obviously opinions change over time. You have a big board. There's things that you like about these guys, things you don't like about these guys. They get to Summer League, and for whatever reason, they fare better in Summer League than in college or vice versa. Things change, so you start to see your opinion sway a little bit. So for our first question on this podcast we want to present to you is basically, we want to know how your opinions of a few players, based on what you've seen so far in Summer League, have changed in any way. So that can be positively, it can be negatively. A guy that you had ranked 15th on your board now is 25th, or started 30th and you want to move them up somewhere in the 20s, something like that. Are there any players that you've seen so far, whether it's yesterday, today, anybody that stands out to you as players that have shifted your perspective of them in one way or another?
Yeah, so it's really early still in Summer League, so I don't have too many really strong generalizations or opinions that I have changed that really strongly.
Sure.
But one guy in particular who I saw play today earlier was Jordan Walsh, and I think just the amount of shots that he made, the confidence that he had, that was kind of a big thing for him at Arkansas, just being able to take the open ones and not hesitate. And then obviously when you're knocking down 4 or 5 like he did today, that's a game changer for him. And the expectation for him as a prospect wasn't for him to do too much offensively and just be this world beater on that end. It was what he does defensively, the size, the length, the strength, and then being able to just knock down a spot 3 and just be able to make that extra pass or finish in transition, those type of things. But what he showed today, I feel like if he continues that, he's going to be somebody who really outperforms his draft place, where I think was 38th by the Celtics, in a way that maybe some others, just haven't shown that so far. Right. I also think another guy who I had unranked, I was a big fan of, though, throughout the college basketball season, was Marquise Noel, Kansas State, and now with the Toronto Raptors. And, obviously being a guy who's 5'6", without shoes on, that's going to be a major thing that, holds you back at the next level. And that was kind of the big reason why I didn't have him, inside my top 60 and, things like that. But what he showed, just the electricness of his game, being able to get into the paint and create, great looks for other players, and also be able to score the ball at a high rate and also hold his own on the perimeter defensively. I think that type of stuff, that's part of the reason Toronto already signed him to the two-way. Small, size of him, and then just being able to knock down threes at a higher rate. That was kind of my hesitation. But if he continues this, I think that, you got a guy who might be able to contribute and beat all the odds that, are kind of against him in terms of the measurables. So
Definitely.
Those two have stood out. I would throw in Hunter Tyson as well from the Nuggets, who had a really big day.
Yes, he did.
I think he was in my 50s. What he showed immediately, he might be, somebody who could potentially contribute. Obviously, it's just Summer League. We've got to see, more down the line. But I really like what I saw from him as well.
Yeah, and more on that, you're obviously it's extremely early in Summer League. At what point do you feel swayed? Even after Summer League's over, are you just kind of taking it all with a grain of salt heading into the regular season? Or do you put a lot of weight into how it went with Summer League? Obviously, it's different competition than the NBA regular season, but how much do you get swayed one way or the other, in your past experience watching these guys?
Yeah, you kind of just try to take bits and pieces of their games individually, just kind of focus on, okay, like this is what he did as a three-point shooter, this is how he looked reading in the pick and roll, or this is how he looked playing defense and help side defense, and things of that nature, more than like, okay, he had 25 points, he's immediately gonna come into the league scoring. It's more of like just the bits and pieces of the game that you kind of look for, and also like you pay more attention to the guys who do show something, especially when you didn't have those types of expectations, more than like a guy that we came in and we saw, like I remember Trae Young, his first summer league game, he was pretty bad.
It was rough.
Yeah. So it's like you can't necessarily put everything on what happens here, but you just kind of look at certain bits and pieces of what happens.
Sure. And to that point, I would say that when it comes to these guys' performances, like you said, you can't put too much weight in this, but there are some things that translate into the regular season. We see certain traits, certain characteristics of guys that will definitely translate. Like if we see a guy like Nikola Jokic for the Miami Heat, and you see the weight he's put on, and you see the way he's attacking the rim, just not letting guys deter him from getting inside, using his size. I mean, he's a legit 6'11", almost 7-footer. And it seems like every time I watch him, he's dedicated to getting inside the paint and at least drawing a foul. And he has the shooting touch. He's going to convert a lot of those free throws. So he's going to generate a lot of points from the restricted area. He's going to get a lot of points from the outside. So things like that will translate. And, okay, sure, if he scores 30 points in the Summer League game, we're not going to automatically assume he's going to average 20 points for the season. But those flashes definitely kind of help us connect the dots as far as what kind of player he could be.
Yeah, definitely for those second-year guys, you're looking for, what do they improve on? Like, how do they come in physically? How are they shooting the ball? If a guy comes in and he's like a terrible shooter, relatively, what does he look like in that aspect? Or somebody who just constantly got beat off ball, like what is he looking like in those specific areas? And I think those are the type of things you look for those guys who have been here before. And then also, if they continue doing it, then there's something that's, like a James Bouknight, for example, that, certain things just haven't changed over the time, then, might be headed in a different direction.
Exactly. And I'm glad that this conversation has shifted to a place where we're talking about these guys, how they translate to the regular season. And then we also want to talk about sophomores. There are players out here in Summer League that are playing for the second time. Some players fare really well in their second tour of duty. Champagne is a name that comes to mind. He's just been tearing the court up every time he hits the court. He's obviously learned a lot during his first campaign, sitting out for another campaign. He's learned a lot, and he's applying all down the court every single time down. And then there are other players on the other side of the spectrum, and they're here even maybe for the third time, and you're just really it seems like they're just desperate. You're desperate to see any little bit of improvement from them. Kai Jones is a name that comes to mind for me as a guy where I watched him in 2021 in Summer League. I saw flashes, and it's like, hey, can you put this all together in a package that allows a team to play you for 15, 20 minutes a game without worrying about you being a defensive liability, getting lost, just not being smart with the ball. And it seems like in this third stint, things are kind of the same. And those are the red flags that really, I think, make a team really just get down on these guys and question whether or not they even want to bring them back for another campaign. So when it comes to sophomores, are there any players that come to mind for you as guys that have really taken advantage of the opportunity to come in here as a veteran, and then maybe some guys that haven't done quite the same thing?
Yeah, so the first person that was actually on my list was Julian Champagnie as well. I think he's been excellent. Another guy who played yesterday was Jabari Smith Jr. And it was funny because he had a pretty down first half, and then both on Twitter and people, around me in the arena, you could kind of feel like they just wanted more out of him, and, obviously missing shots and, just having a few plays just not go his way. But in that second half, he was big time, doing all the things that we've seen from him, and that, like, who he is as a player, making the pull-up threes in transition and, converting on those post-up looks that he had, those face-ups. And then also, doing things defensively, being active on that end. He had, the big block down the stretch where, Portland kind of did something that they shouldn't have and kept going, which led to, Tari Eason throwing the inbound pass and then making the game-winning three. And then, that's what we remember. But I've really liked what I've seen from him so far, just in that aspect, because, when he is hitting shots, he is a guy that is someone who is worthy of being a top 5 pick as he was last year. So he'd be on that list. I think another guy would be Malachi Branham, on
Yeah.
the Spurs, of course. He was somebody who, even was playing before out in the California Classic, I believe. And just his ability, like his confidence, the way that he moves with the ball now. He actually played fairly well. I thought he was a little bit underrated as a rookie, at least down the stretch. I know he averaged like about 14 points. Shot like 46% from the field on like the last 29 games. I only know that because I was preparing for a video that I was doing a couple weeks ago. He's brought that into Summer League and been a big-time shot maker, somebody who I think is going to make a big difference for the Spurs in the future of their franchise. Obviously, having Wemby there and, just the direction that they're going in. So those guys would be at the top of my list. I know there's a few others that have been kind of making strides, but I've really liked what I've seen from them.
And that's what it seems like with the sophomores is you're really looking to see if they're transitioning into confident out there on the court. Right. With the rookies, even if they're the top-end prospects, Wemby, for example, they're just trying to get their legs underneath them and figure out how the game is played at this level. When you're a sophomore, you're turning to, okay, it's your time to take over the game. I don't care where you were drafted. Like, this is where you need to step up and outperform the rest of the competition. And I think that's really, it's make or break for these sophomores in that situation, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's just all you want to see. You just want to see them, make those strides, be able to, and it's also about the little things. I think we always focus a lot on scoring. Obviously, you want the scorers to score the ball in this setting, but like doing the little things, all the communication, and that, especially in this environment, especially in like Cox Pavilion where you can see them up close, you get to see all the communication, the body language, and being able to be in the right spots at a high level. So all those little things and being able to make the extra pass, that's what teams are focusing on more, especially for some of those fringe guys. Can you come in? Can you make the extra pass? Can you, how are you communicating the dirty work, doing all those types of things. So, just been able to look at those guys and how they're contributing.
Yeah, Colin and I got a really good look at the small things that Orlando Robinson was doing over in Cox Pavilion earlier today. And I think for the big man, in some ways it can be even more important for them to do the small things because in today's NBA, those guys don't have a high usage rate. You're not looking for those guys to just get the ball in the post, go up, and finish by themselves without making a play for somebody else. So for somebody like Orlando, I was looking at screen setting. Are you setting a solid screen, getting that defender off of the guy handling the ball and opening yourself up for a 2-on-1 going to the rim? He did that in a big way. How are you moving when it comes to defensively, staying with your man, using your feet? For those big guys, it's very important. When it came to the fourth quarter, he was moving his feet really well. He was getting switched onto guards. He wasn't getting glossed or blown by. He was right there. He blocked 2 shots, but I'm sure he deterred several others. Things like that for a guy like him, who's also a sophomore in that situation, really stood out to me. And, of course, the box score was awesome. That 36-point game is like, wow, it jumps off the page. But for him, it was those little things that I think are going to solidify a spot for him in the rotation. Losing a guy like, Yurtsevin might not be back. He's a restricted free agent, but nothing has happened on that front. And guys like Cody Zeller have walked away now from the team, going somewhere else. So for him, the opportunity is there, and it just comes back to, what can you do that's in between the lines? Not everybody can be a superstar, so what can you do to fill in when things are quite going your way, and what can you do to supplement those big-time players?
Yeah, especially with him specifically, because that was the big thing on him coming in. It was like, okay, we can see that you have like a really unique skill set for a big guy. You can go inside, you can score on the post, you can also, stretch it out and shoot the three some. But, all those little things, the defense, the pick and roll coverages, being in the right spots, that's what I look for him. Obviously, you have 40 and 10, so that's you can't say that's not a positive.
Yeah, sure.
But,
that's what Spo's looking for too, right?
Right.
Those little things like
all the
that.
Little things, just being able to make improvements, show strides there. That's what's going to get him into the Miami Heat rotation and being able to get some opportunities at some point in the season, especially with, like you said, all those different moves happening on that front.
One other player I wanted to touch on here that hasn't quite made the same impression. I hate that I keep going back to Charlotte. I feel bad for doing this. I promise I don't have it out for their fans. I know. Nothing personal. But with James Bouknight, I'm just concerned. It's his third tour duty. You would think at this point he would be pouring in 20-point games because that's his calling card as a scorer. You look to him to create a shot at the rim, create a shot for himself at 3. The flashes are still there, but at this point we have to get more than flashes. I need to see more from you. A little bit disappointed, and I just really hope that this isn't a sign of things to come. Kai Jones, James Bouknight, I just hate to see these guys kind of stall out, and I hope it's not a product of something bigger going on with that Charlotte organization.
Yeah, I've liked a little bit more of what Kai Jones has shown just because, he has more room for error. He's a big dude. He has supreme athlete.
Yes, 100%.
Book night is like, okay, you're going to have to score. If you don't score, you got to do the little things. We know that you don't do those things, especially this entire roster as a collective, like just the ball movement, just making the extra pass, making the right play every time that hasn't been there. And he's, kind of part of that, unfortunately. But yeah, it's kind of, they're at a crossroads. They have a lot of different talent guys coming in, and that's what happens in the NBA. It starts to snowball. You guys get passed up if those necessary improvements don't happen.
And I wonder if it's a compounding effect. Like your first year, you struggle. You come out here, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. You don't produce, and then the third year, it's kind of like a culmination of those two. It's really just it kind of reinforces the point that this is a mental game first and foremost. Your strength can be there and everything, but if you're not right here in the head, then you're just not going to have a lot of success, and he's another example of that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of happens over the, maybe we're, jumping the gun a little bit. Maybe he just turns it on these next couple games. And
he probably will.
Right.
Just 'cause we said that.
Right. We had this whole thing, goes for 40 or something. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting to kind of watch, especially with, Charlotte and Brandon Miller and, just kind of the direction of where they're going.
Definitely. So speaking of direction, we'll close on this point. The Summer League, they're thinking of implementing 2 new rules that could go into effect for the next NBA season. The first of which being the flopping penalty. So we've already seen this called, I think, a couple of times past couple of days. If you're called for a flop, it's basically a technical. It'd be a free throw for the opposing team. And then with the challenges, I mean, people have been calling for this for a long time. But if you win that first challenge, it only makes sense for you to get a second one. So they're testing those 2 out. Do you have any initial thoughts on how you think that will translate to the regular season? Do you like those changes? Obviously, the fact that we contest it in a place like Summer League is great, but do you think they're really going to be a welcome change when we get to regular season if they get passed?
I think the flopping technicals I still have a bit of an issue with, only because there's some room for interpretation that I don't necessarily trust the refs with.
It's a gray area.
Right. And, I can't remember who it was yesterday who got hit in the face, and then they kind of sold it, and then 5 seconds later they got, hit with the flop technical. And it was like, well, I mean, he did get hit in the face. It's like, how can you necessarily punish him for that? That's the one I have a little bit of, kind of issues with. I'm kind of curious to see what happens with that. The challenge, for sure. That should have been there from the jump.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're going to take something kind of from the NFL, you got to, use it in the full way that it is. So I think that's going to be good. Slow the game down in some parts. Obviously, people don't love replay, but I think it's good for getting plays right and making sure everything happens how it's supposed to.
And I almost like where it's different from the NFL is if you do lose it, you don't have a second one, right? So that's a good part. You get your challenge back. So in that sense, it's not slowing down the game.
Right.
A ton where you just have 2 challenges. But on the part is the flopping technical, you're right. I mean, it's the snowball effect. We're going down the same lane as the flagrant ones and flagrant 2s when we're all watching it and we're all watching every millimeter, and then no one can agree on what it is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm just afraid there's going to be a lot of moments where it's just completely up to interpretation. You'd be like, well, I mean, he got hit. There's one that actually bugs me a lot. I tweet about it all the time. When players are fading to their right or their left, for lefties, and kick that leg out because it's just kind of something that naturally happens when you're, shooting on the move, and then they get called for an offensive foul when that's not necessarily the reason that should have, happened. I just feel like there's going to be more of that gray area type of call with, somebody getting hit and actually selling it. I feel like Marcus Smart is going to have a very rough time with this.
Yeah, he is.
Because he actually does flop a lot, but there are times where there's contact there. He's just being able to. He's a big dude, so he's going to have to sell it in some way. I just don't know where they're going to draw the line on that.
Yeah, and his yelling when he gets hit is that going to be the flop?
That's the finishing touch.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting, and God forbid, a big game gets decided at the end of a game. With one of those calls.
I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. It's going to go crazy on Twitter. So
the fans, I was just about to say Twitter. The fans are going to be losing their minds, man. All the bitches. But one last point. Going back to the challenges, it just makes a lot of sense because now, as it stands, if you have one challenge, why use it before the 4th quarter? Only situation I can see is if you have a star player that's in foul trouble and you want to keep them from getting a 3rd foul in the 2nd quarter or something like that. But otherwise, it makes so much more sense to save it for the 4th quarter. So I think it allows for a little more strategy, a little more strategic placement of the challenges, and not kind of pigeonhole everybody into oh, hey, let's just wait until the 4th quarter to use it. So I do like that part of it. adds a little more strategy, a little more intrigue, and I think it's just going to make games a little bit more fun, even if it does slow down just a tiny bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's definitely going to be, good for those coaches who do hesitate to use them on certain plays early on.
Yeah, well, when you're going to be penalized for using it in the first half and being successful, and then a bigger play happens in the fourth quarter, and now you don't have one, even though you were successful when when the ref screwed up. It just makes perfect sense.
That's exactly right, man. That's exactly right. Yeah. So that about does it for our conversation this evening, everybody. I want to thank you again, Keandre, for joining us on this podcast. Always great to have you on. You really know hoops, and you really know a lot about the draft scene. So thanks for imparting some of that knowledge on this podcast, and just best of luck with what you got going on with
Intellect for sure.
Hoops Intellect, everybody. He's really got it going on over there. So we appreciate you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. I love being in this kind of environment.
It's beautiful,
really
right?
Cool. Yeah.
We'll do it again next year for sure.
Oh, yeah. We just got to keep it going.
Yeah.
So, everybody, don't forget to check out our website for all new content coming this summer. Draft picks, cap sheets. It will all be updated in real time. As trades happen, as signings happen, we have it all for you here. Of course, our podcast will be there for you as well if you want to check those out. So, everybody, we're signing out from Summer League 2K24. But rest assured, we have many more interviews coming your way. Great times here in Vegas at Thomas and Mack. Don't miss it. And we hope to see you guys in the next installment. So until then, take care.